Father in heaven, there's some part of us that sometimes feels like we want more than the things that are regular. As we continue to explore that part of us and things that might answer that question, we pray that you will bless us with your Spirit. Bless our search. In Jesus' name. Welcome. Good to see you. I'm always fascinated by how regularly people find a spot. See, I knew where Mikey was going to go. There's lots of places, but I would have bet that I knew where he was going to go. I know where Adriana, if someone filled up that back corner, he would be so out of sorts. He'd be sitting somewhere else going, I'm coming at 6.
I'd have to take somebody else's seat. That'd be bad.
It would be just heinous. I mean, people have really, for the most part, most people have found a zone, at least a zone, if not a spot. And they continue to occupy it. And for some people, it's not just out of habit, it's out of some sort of strategy. My wife knows when I go to a restaurant that I want to be seated so that there's nobody behind me, and I can see the entrance and I can kind of have the whole, and that was from being a cop. I was so used to going in to have dinner at a restaurant or breakfast, whatever the shift was, and I needed to have my back in the corner somewhere. And if I went in and there was no suitable place, I just said forget it and go somewhere else. There's just no way. And I'm gonna sit with 9/10 of some restaurant at my back that I can't watch when I'm on duty. That wouldn't happen. So there's all kinds of things. Some people like to sit up here. When I was in school, I did like to sit front and center because it's kind of strange. I didn't really care. I was enough of a presence, and I was obnoxious enough to get called on from the front or the back, and that was all fine. But I found that I could hear the teacher muttering or talking quietly to other people, trying not to be heard if I sat up in the front, and I didn't want to miss anything, especially if it was somebody's private business. I didn't want to miss out on overhearing it, hearing him over talking or overhearing him talking or whatever. We have some really complex things about us that that are very individual. I would have no trouble. I would have to see you. If I knew you well, I wouldn't have to see you in order to know who I was talking to. Like if you sent an email message and we cut out the headers and all we could see was the content, and I really knew you. We'd had a friendship that went for 10 years at least. Went to high school together, and I knew you since then, and all of that. I could just read the content, and I would know who said it, as opposed to someone else saying it in very many cases. Just the flavor of the language or whatever. The kinds of things, the concerns that would be expressed and everything. We have interpreted this notion of spirituality in Western culture. By Western, I mean the Western European tradition, as opposed to Middle Eastern or Far Eastern or African or South American or anything like that. This sort of thing that the Greeks launched and everybody kind of held on to in flow. There's been an increasing emphasis on experiencing our reality as separate individuals, of thinking about the bottom line is not the people in my community, not even my family, just me. And it has continued to increase and increase and increase and increase. And while that's been happening, there's still been people in parts of the world where that's not true. There have been people who have not, at least they haven't as much, continued to intensify this focus on self as your bottom line priority. Now, when you go to make decisions and you say, okay, I have to decide what's the best thing to do here, you're going to make those decisions based on a number of things. Some of those things are based on just habit, like when you come into the classroom and you've already figured out what's your spot, you just go there without thinking about it. When it's the first day of class, though, Monday before last, when you came in, you needed to kind of get a feel for where the room was, and in some cases, you needed to look around and see what kind of people were here and what was going on. And some of you made a few adjustments. You started out one place and then you said, negative. I would have had a better feeling. And then you adjusted and now you're in that spot. Because you kind of figure at some level that you've misjudged. But once you start doing things by habit, the habits have either been inherited and accepted instead of being rejected. Because think about it, there's some things you do right now the way that your family that raised you did. However you came up, you had certain things that you just do that way. When and if you get into marriage or other mutual cohabitation kind of relationship, you're at that point you start to discover that some of the things that you thought everybody did a certain way, and even to a certain extent having a roommate in the dorm, you realize that when you met them and shook their hand after you got assigned to a room with them, or you decided, your senior year of high school, hey, let's room together at college or whatever, or in the case of a spouse, all the time, even when you were dating, you feel this pretty nice person, and then you get together and you realize that they're actually a psychotic person. That they do some things that are so backwards you can't even understand how anybody could consider doing something so backwards. I mean, and it could be something like how they do their breakfast, or how they get ready in the morning, or how they keep their stuff, how they maintain their area, or it could be how they mess with your stuff. It could be how they regard what you have in the refrigerator, or don't regard it. And it could be even how the person does their religious and spiritual exercises. If you came up in a family where you have no exceptions, you will have worship before anything else. Sometimes like you combine it with breakfast. Everyone comes to the breakfast table. I don't know how common that is anymore, but did any of you come from a family where your family had worship in the morning before you went someplace? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Excellent. So pretty much you started the day as a family. You had worship as a family. And if they were really, really conscientious about doing this thing, then when you get with someone else and they're not doing it, you're trying to have worship and they're trying to run a hairdryer or whatever, and they're not interested in having worship with you. You kind of figure, well, if we all are together, then, even in the dorm room, then we ought to do this. Or you get married with somebody, and you even talked and compared with what your families do, but then you say, obviously, I come from a family that did that. Other people come from a family that didn't do that, including my partner. So maybe there's some things about their family that if I adopted them, that would be an improvement. But certainly having worship in the morning or not, I got the high road on this one, so we're obviously going to do this. And the person is like, we're obviously not going to do this. They may say to you something like, that seems so rote. It seems so mechanical. It seems so on the calendar. It seems so insincere or inauthentic because it's just your habit. You're just doing religion and worship by habit. And what I do is, I have very special times that I set aside, less frequent, so that they stay special. I don't want to wear them out. You know, and they had this whole, and you're going, and you're playing it, and you're going, psycho. But you're doing it inside, or in the, you know, you can say backslider, or you can say infidel. You know, there's a heretic, whatever it is, you know, spiritually inferior, or now I have an evangelism project in my own home. Good, I'm a missionary. I will help this person. I'll pray for them so that they can come to the moral high ground, the religious high ground, to be godly like my family, you know. And it goes both ways. It does. It goes both ways because we have a tendency to want to confirm that what we're doing is the right thing. Now, not all of those things that are our habit or our custom, or even when we come to a unique situation, how we deal with it, not all of those things, though, are something that we got from our foes. There's some of you, in a room this size, there's at least 2 or 3 of you, that you came from a family that was, say, and we're just picking on religion because it's more germane to the subject, could be about anything. It could be about nutrition or exercise or how to keep house or anything like that. Whether the TV goes on at certain times or you even have one or not. You could in fact come from a family that was irreligious, and then you at some point said, well, that's not for me. I want to live a very spiritual life, and I want to have these practices, and so you do them, and the rest of the family doesn't. So you've identified very intentionally with some of these religious and spiritual practices, and they are hard-earned for you. You did them on purpose. So now they become a habit later on, now that you make a good habit. And that's important. Making good habits and good traditions for yourself and rituals is super important. What you do over and 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 over really shapes your character. It really starts to reprogram the part that you can't get at, like right now on purpose, and just put in different instructions, like you wish I wouldn't do that kind of thing, you know? Or why do I always, or how come I say I'm gonna and then I don't? All that stuff, that willpower stuff that you find turns into promises of sand or whatever, you know, just they go evaporate. Like Paul says at the end of Romans 7, he says, I'm not arguing with you that the law is important and is good. I think it is. I mean, we really need to do God's law and all of that. So I'm not saying that we ought not to, but I'm saying I found out about another law. That's the law inside of Paul. Here's Paul's law. Instead of God's law, Paul's law is when I say I'm going to do this from now on. This is every time, every day at this time, and whatever it is. Or I'm not going to do it, you know, whatever. When it actually comes down to time to do it or not do it, I do the opposite. You know, whatever good thing I say I'm going to do, it comes right down to where the rubber meets the road, and reliably, as a law, I don't do it. And then I say, don't do that. I'm never doing that again. And then when it comes time to not do that, the law is, the law of Paul, I do it. And he says, man, it's kind of like, it's a different me. It's not even me. At another time, he said, it's just a sin that dwells in me. It's like, my program is hacked or something, or I inherited a broken program from the manufacturer or something. I don't know what happened. But then at the end of Romans chapter 7, he says, who's going to deliver me from this death trap kind of body? And then in Romans 8, it starts out, but thanks be to God that giveth us the victory through the Lord Jesus Christ. He gives us the victory because I can't win this one. I'm not winning it. I'm trying, and my willpower is bad. And some of us have bad willpower. Does anybody here ever have bad willpower? You ever just say, gosh, yeah, I say, I am going to be the most ripped person. I'm going to go to the gym 4 times a week, and here's my routine, and you get on Excel, and you make a spreadsheet, and you plan it all out, you know, and you're looking stuff up, and you're going on forums and everything. You go to Muscle and Fitness, and they let you do a profile online, and you can put in, you take a before picture, and you're going, I better Photoshop that, you know. And then you pick out like some great bodybuilder, and then you cut your head off, and you tape it on there and put it on the refrigerator, and then you go there and you still eat a pack of cookies. The next time it's evening and you're not feeling like, and you didn't go to the gym anyway, and forget it. And then you have chocolate chips and whole milk, and like until it's gone, and you go, and then later on, like it's morning, and you're looking at your spreadsheet again. Okay, I better adjust that because now I've gained 2 pounds in one night, and that was supposed to be here, and it's here, and what the heck? And you go, what a minute. Well, this becomes a major spiritual issue. And it's a much bigger issue to people in individualistic kind of cultures than it is for people in cultures that are concerned more about the community. When the focus goes on self, it's like one big self-improvement program that goes all of our lives here in the West. Now some of you, very few, but some of you may actually have come up in families and even in cultures that are more collectivist, and so this isn't resonating with you in the same way. It means something different to you when I say this. Many people today have the notion that spirituality is really one more tool in their self-improvement plan. It's one more little self-help thing that can make you a superstar. It can make you one day become the CEO, or make your album go platinum, or get you in the NBA, or make it so that you're a YouTube hero. You know, somebody has to start the next franchise to dwarf the likes of Lucasfilms, of course, and so some of you are like, I'm doing that. Or to become like Teacher of the Year and get honored at the White House because you're such a great teacher that they give you a bunch of kids that have got a 0 IQ, and then they're all like Rhodes Scholars just because they went through your 3rd grade class. And whatever it is, we have these notions of like we're a race car that's entered in the Indy, and there's all these people that should be serving us, the pit crew and the sponsors and everything, and you're always trying to tune that up or get a little different design on some sort of airfoil, or trying to tweak the air fuel mixture or something just right, and you're practicing and you're studying, and it's all so that you can win that race. And in fact, even in the Bible, it kind of uses that metaphor that we run with endurance, the marathon, the race that is set before us. It's all these metaphors, and it's really in California, in the Bay Area today, it's really almost at a fever pitch. It's like ready to just spin off the plate the notion of everything needs to fit into really shoring up and perfecting the superstar, the one that matters. The one that matters. Now, really, how many eyeballs do you get to look through? And unless you're an ophthalmologist, how many eyeballs, and from the inside out, how many do you get to look through? How many eyeballs do you get? Really, you only get a couple of them, and they're usually focused on almost the same thing. And that seems to lend itself to making some sort of sense out of, well, I can't live your life. How am I going to live your life? I can't live your life. I mean, it's inconvenient. I'm here, and you're there, and you're in all the places your life goes, and I'm not. and I can't be. You know, even if we were really good friends, I mean, there's a point at which you've got your space and your boundaries. Your skin is a boundary, right? And your property and your plans and your memories. And I don't have those. But strangely, if we were to look at the people that tend to be recognized and tend to draw us as being spiritual champions. I mean, and at the top of my list of spiritual champions, and in a category without any and no other elements in that category, is Jesus. If you would look at just the life of Christ, not all of the comments people have made about the life of Christ, just the best we have trying to reconstruct what the life of Christ actually, I mean, what did he do? I mean, is it even justified to look there as one of the, if not the most important places to find out what it would be to really see the ultimate in spirituality? And let's back away from it for a minute. If you were trying to someday become a serious basketball player, or even if you're just going to become a trillionaire and buy a basketball team, whatever, you need to understand what is the best basketball. Well, it's kind of easy. The best basketball is a little more simple a project. At the end of the game, every time there's a game, you have made more points. You made the ball go in between the metal circle, the right one, the ring, more times than the other people, so that the scoreboard has more on your side. So it's really a simple objective. It doesn't really matter if you fouled out. It doesn't matter. At the end of the game, the only thing that matters is, did you win the game? And at the end of the season, did you win more games and the right ones in the right order than anyone else? So it's basically just you want the championship. That's it. Blessings. And so we got the lead. What do you play? Rhythm? You play rhythm?
I'm on the sideline.
You're on the sideline?
Headset and
You're doing the sound? Okay. I got a sound joke for you tomorrow. No, Monday. Actually, I got about 3 of them. I got a sound guy joke for you.
I'll be ready.
Okay, you better be ready. Want to arm yourself with a guitarist joke. Okay, well, we don't have time for a sound joke right now because he's got to go turn knobs and waste half a roll of duct tape. So that wasn't one of them. But you know there's duct tape when you're a sound guy, right? There's always duct tape. So if you wanted to find out how you can have the most excellent basketball, wouldn't one of the really cool ways be to try to find out who's the greatest basketball player of all time, and then what were they doing? I mean, who was the greatest basketball player? Who was it? Somebody here is a fanatic. I'm not. I couldn't even name 2 basketball players, and they probably aren't even in the game anymore. They might have died, and they wouldn't have known.
Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan. Okay. So now I've heard people say that there's a debate between whether the greatest athlete of all time was Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky. Since I have never watched a hockey game ever, and I think I could probably keep my spotless record. And I think the last time I watched a basketball game, like a pro basketball game, was when I was a freshman in high school. So I got a few years behind me of not doing that I can probably. But I've at least heard the discussion when people are just talking about the psychology of human excellence. And the sports field is interesting because it allows us sort of a laboratory of, like laboratories always are. They're not real. They don't really apply to life necessarily. They might, but it's simple enough we can look at it. So what makes? Let's just go with the idea that maybe it's Michael Jordan. Okay. what makes Michael Jordan, if he is, what makes Michael Jordan the best basketball player ever?
His work ethic.
His work ethic. So that's something you could apply to other things, isn't it? What else?
Perseverance.
Perseverance. They were run with patience the race, endurance the race. Yeah. His legacy. The fact that people have made myths about him even. And he allows other people to aspire. Even outside of his discipline. Right? Even business people, even ministers. Yes, ma'am.
Leadership and leadership by example. I don't know if you watched the flu game, but he had the flu and he still played close.
Oh, so he pushed on even though he was sick and set an example and people want to follow him because they admire him. Okay. The awards that he got, the actual official recognition. Okay, so he was not, it wasn't all about him. He was a team player.
He has a really strong will.
Pardon?
Strong will.
He has a strong will. And by a strong will, I mean, he has a couple of things. Maybe stubborn about keeping his goals in mind and able to keep himself in check to get, to do what he needs to do.
He was determined.
He's determined.
He's gonna
Yeah.
get it. I really was just like raw passion, because like a lot of people go throughout life choosing like a wrong job, but definitely was what he's doing.
Okay, so there was passion.
Yeah.
If you have passion, you can get in the zone. Now, I don't just mean like if you're in the right zone to score 3 points, or you're in the zone and better get out of it because you got to shoot in time. I don't mean that zone. I mean the zone like Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talks about, the getting in the zone and having flow.
Yeah.
When time is not an issue and you just lose track of time and everything. Well, that is a spiritual issue. Yes.
He's an influencer.
He's an influencer.
I don't think this has been said. Calculated.
Calculated. So he looks at it and he doesn't just go off in stupid directions. It's well chosen.
He wasn't born great.
He wasn't born great.
He worked for it.
He had to work for it. He wasn't born in greatness. Because there's something about us that resents somebody who's born with all the advantages, and then of course now they're dominating us. We don't care for that, right? Because it takes our hope away. We like to see the rags to riches thing. We like to see that it was born in a barn in Bethlehem. But it's God. That's an issue. But could anyone argue the case? Could we make a case for any other basketball players? There have been some really outstanding basketball players, have there not?
Yeah.
There have. Name the second, or let's say, is there anyone here that thinks, I think so-and-so might be a better basketball player?
Steph Curry.
Huh?
Steph Curry.
Steph Gray? Steph Curry. Oh, Curry. What team? Warriors. I've never heard of this person. But is that a contender?
Yeah.
That's a good, why?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet, but he's on a
Yeah.
trajectory?
Yeah.
Is he a youngster?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant. You have another one.
Get a dollar, say Kobe Bryant.
LeBron James, you're not really committed to Curry, are you?
No.
No.
Black Mamba.
Who?
The Black Mamba.
The Black Mamba.
AKA Kobe
Herpetology,
Bryant.
not basketball.
Same thing.
Oh, Kobe Bryant. Buddy Hill, I've never heard of Buddy Hill. Is this like when the baskets were blower or something? Is this a long time ago? So, okay. Now, what? It's not exactly the same discussion, though. It's not exactly the same discussion, but it has some, the way that our brain deals with it, the way that we functionally think about it, and the way society deals about it, the way that history deals with it. There are some similarities, but there are some serious differences between trying to decide who's the best basketball player of all time and trying to decide who is the ultimate spiritual example, the champion of spirituality. It makes a lot more difference, maybe, deciding who's the champion of spirituality than it does the champion of basketball. Because there are actually some things that Jesus advocated, even though it's true that there are very serious spiritual examples. There's spiritual Jesus is not the only spiritual champion, but I have Jesus in Jesus' own category. But there's people who disagree with that. There's people who say, yes, Jesus is the perfect example, but then they say, but so is the Buddha. And they say, and so there's people who believe today that so is the 14th Dalai Lama. And they can make arguments for it. Lists can be made, like the one we made for ball players. Now, there are some things, though, that overlap. And I'm going to say that be very careful. I'm not asking you to just say, well, it doesn't matter, just worship Buddha instead of Jesus. I wouldn't say that because that's not my model. I'm not here to disrespect someone else's model, especially if I look at their life, and they're better people than I am. I'm not going to argue with some of that, but I still really see, especially going forward as humanity, I see something very special that's not in, for instance, the moral code of any other of the major spiritual champions. That's entirely, as far as I can tell, unique to Jesus. And there's several categories of things that, first of all, they tend to occur in spiritual people in ways that are way beyond the way they occur in regular folk. In spiritual champions, they bring these things just so that there's this category of people that do these Mother Teresa kinds of things, or that forgive like the Dalai Lama forgives, or that, and like Jesus, is asking in behalf of the people nailing him to a board, to have them forgiven because they're ignorant of the exact moral nature of what they're doing. They don't get it. And so he doesn't want any way, he says, this is not on their record. I'm complicit with this, Let's just call this, I ask him to do it. That's how it gets counted, which I mean, when someone wrongs me, my guts tell me to just look at it and go, is this a pattern? Do I need to step up and deal with this? And I've got ways I describe it so that it sounds really spiritual and really honorable. It's like, because it's a responsibility, I'm pretty good at getting people, so I should do this, because this is a bully, and I need to take them down so that they don't continue to hurt other people. But that's not what Jesus said. That's what Robert says. And it's just a fancy rationalization for revenge and for justice. We have a tendency to want to emphasize, don't forget God's justice. You can talk about his tender mercy, but don't forget his justice. But Jesus actually doesn't represent that balance. The way that Jesus described it, the way that Jesus modeled it, causes us today to look at folk among the heroes of Christianity and Judaism and to put them, to help use them to put Jesus in perspective. Okay, all you ever talk about, Pastor, is Jesus. We need to hear something from Moses, and we need to hear something about the churches, especially the Church of Laodicea, from John. You're not spending any time in Revelation, you're always in the Gospels. And it's given us an imbalanced picture of God. Who's God? Now think about what that means. You will run across this. Here's an example, and it's only one example because there's more than a dozen categories where the spiritual champions, whether they're Moses or Mother Teresa or Zoroaster or the Buddha or Muhammad or the Bob, not the B-O-B, the Bob that the Baha'i worship, or the Baha'u'llah, whatever. Or Ellen White. There's a lot of spiritual champions. But Jesus had, in one of the categories, which is what we refer to as the golden rule, if you get one of these books that has a side-by-side comparison of Jesus' sayings and Confucius' sayings and the saints that have made their way from there into the Tao, the things in the Tao Te Ching, the things from the Quran, the things that have been said by various popes and all that. If you take all those side by side, and there's lots of books that give a parallel to things like loving everybody, or forgiveness, and then they have on the page, Jesus said this person said that, this person said that, this person said that. If you look up the golden rule, and the golden rule is kind of cool, it's how you are to treat one another. And I will leave you with, this is the last thing I'm going to say today. Every other statement of the golden rule among the major contenders for spiritual champion are things that are they're stated in the negative. Don't do to somebody else anything that you would hate to have done to you. That's the way the Buddha says it. That's the way it's said in the Tao Te Ching. That's the way it is in the Quran. Jesus says positively, do to others what you would have them do to you. Do you realize the difference? That means that the answer to Cain's question is yes. You are your brother's keeper. And that's a major point of spiritual disagreement and moral disagreement. And it's unique, almost unique to Jesus. But among the spiritual champions that are the real contenders for the Hall of Fame, it is unique to Jesus. I will leave you with that. And we will see you on Monday at the regular time. Unless I forget and come 10 minutes early, then we'll get it. That'll screw up everything.